So hi, everybody. Good evening. I'm Holly Rosen-Fink, president and co-founder of the Westchester Jewish Coalition for Immigration. And I'm honored to be joined by all of you tonight. We're really excited about the program. We have many impressive speakers. And as you know, we're recording this presentation so you can share it with your friends and family later on. A few quick reminders. We would love you to add the name of your congregation or organization next to your name. We would also love you to share in the chat box a bit about yourself, your work in this space, and what you're doing. And the chat will remain open throughout the meeting, and we'll be posting links throughout. Don't feel like you have to capture them. We will send you everything after this meeting. You'll be hearing more about WJCI later in the evening. We've had a lot going on, and that will happen in the final portion of our meeting. First, we want to call your attention for a lovely Devar Torah from Rabbi David Shuck from Beth El Synagogue in New Rochelle. Rabbi Shuck, thank you so much. We're honored to have you.
I want to just thank you for inviting me and for allowing me to share a couple of words before the business really starts. And I'm going to do my best to make this not inside baseball kind of thing. Our Torah is, generally a word of teaching around something from a Jewish text. And I wanted to share a thought between the section that we read in the Torah last week and the section that we're reading this week. And there's a belief in our tradition that something within the text has some relevance to whatever moment we're living in day to day, every time we encounter the text. And so one of the things I was thinking about is in the text of last week, this is a few thousand-year-old tradition. And at the time, there was a rule established that women could not inherit land from their fathers even if they didn't have brothers. That is to say, a man who had children, if those children were not boys, the girls could not inherit the family land. And this was sort of the standard norm at the time. And these women come forward. Their names, they're called the Benot Zelovcha, the daughters of this one man. And they say, this is unjust. We should be able to inherit land just like the boys can, just like the men can from their families. And they demand to be heard. And Moses hears their complaint and takes their complaint to God. And there are two explanations, and God says, these women are right. Of course they should inherit land. And from that moment on, the law changes so that independent of sex, a child can inherit the land of a parent. You might be thinking, what does this have to do with anything? Okay, I'm gonna share two explanations of what was happening here. The first is the Baal HaTurim. This is an understanding that these women, they say, Chachmaniot hayu, they were really smart. They were wise women. And so what they're suggesting is they had some wisdom, they had access to wisdom of the way the law should be, and they brought that wisdom forth, and Moses, and that wisdom was affirmed by God. And this is sort of one explanation of how law changes, that you have really smart people drawing on a tradition through their wisdom, and they develop new ideas. But the answer that I found really compelling, and I wanted to share with all of us tonight, I hope you'll find it meaningful, came from Rashi, who was a commentator in the Middle Ages. And he said, and I want to use his words, Magid shera'ata einan, this teaches us that their eyes saw, their meaning these women, saw with their eyes ma shelo ra'ata eno shel Moshe, what Moses's eyes did not see. And what's so interesting to me about this is it's not about wisdom, it's not about an inherited tradition. This injustice was brought forth and sort of uncovered because people with their eyes saw the problem. In other words, those who are marginalized in our communities are often people who are unseen, physically unseen. We sort of we avert our eyes. We live in spaces where we don't have to encounter people who remind us of the injustice in the world, because day after day, it's very difficult for us to encounter those types of injustices. And in this week's Parsha, the section of the Torah we read this week, we learn about these cities of refuge. So a city of refuge in the Torah is a city that is set aside for people who accidentally kill another person. That is to say, they've done something wrong, not intentionally, but still, because they've taken a life, they actually have to go to these cities of refuge. So they're safe, because they don't want the family to try to avenge this act. And the Torah makes it clear that the people who have to live in the city of refuge are the priests. The Leviim have to live in these religious figures have to live in these cities of refuge, because when people are suffering, the idea is that they need to be around people who are attuned to their suffering and who can offer support. They have to be seen. And so I want to kind of marry these two ideas as a way for us to start this conversation tonight. And because ultimately, I think what the Torah is saying to us is people who are marginalized are often invisible, not because they're tucked away in a city of refuge, but because people willfully don't see those who are suffering and in need. And that the city of refuge, sort of when we map that onto this idea, suggests that every single human being has to play the role of the Leviim, of these religious figures who are there to offer support, to offer guidance, to offer stability, and to fight on behalf of those who are marginalized. And this is really the work that all of you are doing. And in some ways, the hardest part of this work from where I sit is that the struggle with for people who are refugees is in part that nobody has to see them. They're not here just yet, or they're waiting to get into this country. They're waiting for people to create a city of refuge for them to be able to be seen and to be able to be cared for. And the compassion that's required to do this work day in and day out, and through the political process and through winning the hearts and minds of people who really can help but need to be awakened. Their eyes need to be open to this kind of injustice and suffering. This is, to me, this is sacred. This is holy work. And I'm timing myself. I was given 10 minutes. I won't use all of my 10 minutes, but in the last minute or two, I do want to just share that one of the most life-changing experiences I've had was having the opportunity to go to the border of Poland and Ukraine during actually the beginning of a few months into this current war, and to stand at the border to most importantly to learn about organizations who are really creating places of refuge for those who are fleeing war, and entering Poland with a suitcase, mostly women and little children. Their husbands, spouses, fathers are stuck in Ukraine because they have to fight. And they have no idea what's next for them. And people were feeding them, people were clothing them, people were giving medical attention to them, and trying to set up systems of care for this vulnerable population. And having the opportunity to witness that was, of course, emotional. It was painful to see, but it was also inspiring that people like you who are on this call see it as your life work to create places of compassion and refuge for those who are most vulnerable and who are largely invisible to society, our society. So I want to commend you for this work. I want to thank you for this work. And I want to urge all of us, to remain passionately engaged, because complacency is so easy to fall back into.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Shuck. That's a lot for us to think about. Thank you. Our next speaker will be Eva Wyner, who's the Deputy Director of Jewish Affairs for the New York State Executive Chamber, and she works alongside Governor Kathy Hochul.
Hi, everyone. Oh, there's that bio. Well, first of all, thank you all for joining tonight, this evening. And I really admire getting to hear about all of the incredible work that is happening across the state. But truly, from working with Holly and Marty and everyone else in Westchester, it's really inspiring to see what you're all doing, and devoting your time just tonight, but also in general to this work is really integral. And so to kick off the discussion, and I dropped my email in the chat, and anything else that I reference, happy to go into further detail about it, set up further conversations. But I just wanted to take a step back and kind of explain what it is that I do. To some, you might have had a relationship with Jewish liaisons to the governor in the past. But I think that one of the approaches that Governor Hochul takes is a bit different, and one that I hope is encouraging. So I'm the deputy director. That means there's also a director of Jewish affairs, and the privilege we have in having two of us, and that was according to a directive from the governor, is to make sure that we are absolutely everywhere. And Brandon, who's one of my colleagues, who's a representative for both the Westchester region as well as into Rockland County, is that if it were up to the governor, she would personally be here on the Zoom chatting with all of you and hearing about the important work that you're doing. Of course, being the governor, she can't do that. So instead, she has inspired her entire team to actually be on the ground, and integrate herself with that work. And so my charge is to do two things. One is to, of course, advocate for what the governor is doing directly, what the executive chamber is doing, what our state agencies are doing, and just amplify that work within the Jewish community. And then most substantively, and this is where our partnership really comes into fruition, is that my job is to also advocate on behalf of all of you and the work that you're doing within the Jewish community, or what are considered Jewish issues, back to the governor's office. And being that link and being that liaison, and how, as we all know, you can pick an acronym. There's so many different Jewish organizations, but a lot of the time we think about Jewish issues in very simple terms. We think about issues about safety, anti-Semitism, Holocaust education, all very important issues that are certainly on my docket and I deal with every day. But then there's issues like immigration. There's issues that you wouldn't necessarily think, is that a Jewish issue? And exactly what Rabbi Shuck delivered in his Devar Torah just moments ago is that these really, and this organization really is inspired by our Jewish values. And that really compels us, and compels all of you to be here doing that work. And you're not here passively as Jewish, you're here because your Jewish faith, and our Jewish faith, is really leading us into doing that work. And what the Torah tells us within the context of immigration is that there's a moral duty there, and a moral charge, and that is something that is certainly shared by the governor. But I wanted to kind of give that overview to see how I can be of assistance in the future. And so that means, and thankfully we have a lot of folks on this call. We also have Jenny. If I'm not sure if Holly, you wanted Jenny to jump in later, if you wanted Jenny to jump in right after me to give some updates from our Office of New Americans, but we're the linkage of all of these pieces. And if there is an issue that falls within this confines or beyond, we want to make it extraordinarily clear that the governor's office is accessible to all of you. And so I'll give like a very brief overview about what, some of the governor's extraordinary commitments have been within the pale of Afghan refugees, and then later within Ukrainian refugees, what that looks like. But I think that perhaps it would be helpful for Jenny to chime in just after I kind of give that overview, if that's all right. Yeah.
Happy to do so.
All right. Sorry to put you on the spot there. So since December, the governor has really been at the forefront, not just in values, but also in financial implementation. So back in December, that is when she announced the initial $2 million in state funding. And so that was to help Afghan evacuees resettle in New York State. So that was as part of a larger $5 million commitment. Then, as you know, that's when right about, a few months just after that, then we had another crisis on our hands, which is, of course, Ukrainian refugees, and can go on and on about the New York State's commitment to Ukraine writ large, but that also meant making sure that we can be a state that is refuge to Ukrainian refugees as well. And so while in the state of the state, there's funding that was implemented. So that ends up being in the fiscal year for 2023, which was enacted, was $20 million. So this is funding that for arriving from Afghanistan as well as from Ukraine, but also making things accessible. So in March, for example, the governor's directive, which is to launch a website that actually just compiles all of the resources for both Ukrainian people as well as allies to figure out how New York State can not only be a passive actor, but someone who's an active participant here. And then with how things are kind of going right now is that, we're figuring out the allocations of those funds, and in particular, and this is something we're definitely going to include for all of you, on August 12th, there is and I'll let Jenny speak to all of this, but there is a webinar with the Office of New Americans that's all about the allocation of these resources to assist with these arrivals. So with that overview, I would love to turn over to Jenny to jump in and fill in those pieces, if that's all right.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for mentioning that ONA webinar. I just put the registration link in the chat. So I hope you all register and be part of that conversation and that effort. So I wanted to introduce myself. I am a policy associate at the New York State Office for New Americans. And our mission is to support the well-being of immigrants and refugees across New York State in helping them achieve their American dream. And we have been in existence since 2012, and it's hard to think that our office is now a decade old. And the way that we provide support to immigrants and refugees is through a network of community-based organizations. So we partner with your Catholic Charities, with your Neighbors Link, with your American Asian Federation, different organizations that are on the ground, and we provide funding so that they can provide direct services like civics and community engagement. We offer civics classes. We also have English language learning, so we offer classes to help immigrants in their ability to speak English. We have also legal services. So we provide free legal services to immigrants regardless of immigration status. We also have support for work readiness. So we have programs to support immigrants to re-enter their professional field. The program is called Professional Pathways, and we can connect someone who may have been a nurse or a teacher or had some career in their background. I apologize if there's noise in the background. I don't know how much is picked up. But we connect them with a job coach, and it's in partnership with an organization called Upwardly Global. So we have job coaches that can provide that support on the ground. And in addition to that, to the legal services and English classes, civics support, work readiness, we have health and well-being. So particularly now, the importance of mental health has come to our attention, and we have a program called Golden Door. The intent of Golden Door was to support unaccompanied minors, but since then, we've expanded to respond to other communities and their mental health needs. So we're sort of like a group setting facilitated by an MSW to connect to local resources and to discuss the oftentimes traumatic experience that can be leaving your country and starting a life anew, because oftentimes you're escaping gang violence or escaping war, traumatic experiences. So we have the Golden Door program. And in addition to that, another program that our office manages is the Ramirez June Developmental Disabilities Navigator and Initiative. And it's the first of its kind in the country to provide assistance to immigrant families that may have a child, a family member that has an intellectual or developmental disability, whether that's cerebral palsy or whether, the child may be autistic, making sure that we connect them to the services that they need. Oftentimes language is a barrier. Navigating access can be difficult, even for someone who's familiar. It can be difficult, much more so to someone who is an immigrant. And we've noticed that gap in our partnership is funded from the New York State Developmental Disabilities Planning Council. We do workshops for communities, for organizations, and we try to build that capacity within our network to respond to the gap that we have noticed. I want to also mention that our office does we have a monthly webinar series that we offer for the community, particularly for our network of community-based organizations that provide direct services. But we also share that invitation with all of our partners that are also engaged in the mission of supporting immigrants and refugees. For the month of August, we are doing a webinar on highlighting resources from the state. We have presenter welcome.us that will be highlighting a toolkit that they've developed to assist arrivals to New York City and New Jersey. New York State is expected to have around 12,400 arrivals.
Jenny, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we're going over time and we've got.
Thank you, Marty. I appreciate it. But the link is in the chat, and I welcome.
Yes, and we've got links to you in the chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Jenny and Eva. Thanks so much. Our next speaker will be Leah Cover, who's the Executive Director at Ruth's Refuge.
Hi, everybody. I'm Leah Cover. Just gonna get my presentation up here. Can I present for my slideshow?
Marty, that has to be you.
Yeah, I'm gonna do it.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm not faster at this.
That's fine. It's nice to see you all tonight. I think I know some of you from different community connections, and others I haven't met before, but just as waiting to be able to share this with you. Just
yeah, I see. You were out of order.
You've got it, Leah, and
I can do it now. Okay, great.
And you and I have been working together for a long time, so it's really great that we're partners
Okay.
in non-crime.
Exactly. So we are Ruth's Refuge. I'm the executive director and founder. And Ruth's Refuge is the only organization dedicated to providing furniture and home essentials to refugees and asylum seekers living in New York City. For those who don't know about our history at all, so we started out from a volunteer group similar to this, of people coming together at Congregation Beth Elohim in Brooklyn, the refugee task force there, and we started working with a lot of the resettlement agencies in New York City and helping on an ad hoc basis. And over time, it became clear that there was really need for a separate organization that would just be dedicated to this work because of the particular complexities of moving things, storing things in New York City, and the types of hurdles that refugees and asylum seekers face in the city as compared to other areas of the country. So in basic, what we do is we do full apartment setups where people pick out everything for their home and we bring it there and get them set up soup to nuts. We also will get specific items for people that they need if they've been living somewhere for a little while, but they don't have certain items. We do this through a combination of new and used items. For example, all our mattresses and bed frames and linens are all new. We don't take any used, but we do a whole mixture of new and used of everything else mostly. So how it works is basically we partner with 12 different agencies. And that includes the resettlement agencies that operate in New York City, HIAS, Catholic Charities, IRC, but also includes many smaller organizations, especially ones that primarily work with asylum seekers, such as we work with the Queer Detainee Empowerment Project. So they work with LGBTQ plus identifying folks who are coming from all over the world. And many of them have experienced detention and then are in the shelter system and then coming into their first apartments. And we work with legal services providers, so a whole range of organizations. So the agency that we partner with notifies us when a client has secured housing, but does not have furnishings, which is most of the time, unless they have some sort of support network. And those are generally not the instances when we'd be called in. So we review the client's needs with the client or the case manager, depending how the agency prefers to do it. And then the clients pick out their furnishings from our client website. So you see on this slide, there's a screenshot of just a little snippet of our client website. This is not a public facing website, so you wouldn't be able to go look at it. So that's why I grabbed this snippet here, but we assign a personal shopper to each client and they have a Zoom call where they go through the whole website together and pick out everything they want for their home. And this way they get to see everything, they get to decide. And we find this is an extremely important thing for refugees and asylum seekers because the trauma of dislocation and displacement really makes it all the more important for people to have a greater amount of agency in what they decide to have as their possessions, and not feel like they're just being forced to take whatever somebody's willing to give them. So part of what we find very important is people's ability to say no. They say, no, I don't like that, I don't want it. And that's not going to offend anyone. And that it's an important part of the process. Once they've picked out all their furnishings, we then have teams of volunteers. We sometimes hire movers if it's a 6th floor walk-up apartment and it's not suitable for volunteers. But most of the time, it's a team of volunteers who comes to our storage unit in Brooklyn. And they load up the truck and they have someone from our team who's with them, and they all go out to the client's home and bring everything in. And then it's up to the client, because again, client choice and agency is extremely important to us. It's up to the client whether or not they want the volunteers to help them to assemble furniture or put things away or anything like that. And some clients do and some clients don't, and we respect all of that. So who are our clients? I mean, we've served clients from 34 different countries. We were founded in April of 2019, and we've been serving people from all these countries since then. You'll see certainly Afghanistan and Ukraine are in there. We've been working with Afghan and Ukrainian folk since 2019, and we continue to do so, and of course now in greater numbers. But we also continue to work with people from all over the world. And certainly we have a lot of clients right now from Central America, as well as the Caribbean. This gives you a little bit of a sense of our impact that we've had. So since 2021, we've furnished homes for 375 refugees and asylum seekers from 25 different countries. And we, in 2021, we provided over $90,000 worth of household goods. And this year, just through May, we had provided $75,000 worth. So that gives you a sense of how the demand has been scaling up as well. And we've been working hard to meet that demand. And it's actually, at this point, it's over 95,000. We've furnished homes for 100 arriving Afghan refugees since the fall of Afghanistan. And a huge portion of that has been between November and March, was when we had very, very high concentration of apartment setups. as I'm sure many of you worked with a lot of people during that time as well. We've also been working very hard to get everyone air conditioners. It's a very important part of our plan as well. And so we've gotten over 55 air conditioners out as well this season. And we now have 3 staff members and a very expanded volunteer network, which we would certainly hope people might become a part of. And to give you a sense of basic volunteer roles that we have, we always need people for apartment setups and for curbside deliveries, helping with personal shopping, with sourcing furniture, any fundraising, or if you like to come work in our inventory and storage, that's probably less of an option for many of you folks because we're based in Brooklyn. But if people feel like coming down for that, you're certainly welcome. And of course, behind the scenes communications and event planning as well. Other ways to help that you can do more based in Westchester as well is there's always holding a drive. So if your synagogue or community organization wants to hold a drive, we are always in need of many household items. We also have wish lists. To the right here, you can see a little sampling of welcome kits, which we encourage people to make. And that can be a good activity for a synagogue or community group as well, or maybe even across the whole network, that you can try to assemble as many of these kits as possible for people to choose from. We've also had a number of synagogues, especially we've had a lot of success with East End Temple, has very consistently provided an apartment setup team. And that can be a really exciting thing for your community too, if you want to do something that people can be involved on a one-off basis or more consistently. But basically you would commit to having a certain amount of people for a particular date. We would generally choose a weekend date, and then we would plan that out potentially a couple months in advance. And we then slot the family in that you'd be delivering to the week before. But we always know that we're going to need the apartment setup teams. So it's a nice way to be able to have us be able to have predictability and you be able to have predictability and have many people from different stripes involved. So I'm happy to talk to people more about that as well. And then happy to talk to people about our mailing list, our volunteer list, and how to donate furniture, household goods as well.
Leah, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt you.
That was it.
Oh boy, did we time that perfectly. Thank you so much. And Leah's information is in the chat if you want to be in touch with her about volunteering. Thank you. Now, if I could have my screen back, good. I need to make Russ also wants to share some slides. So hang on a second while I make him a co-host. And then Ruth will introduce Russ. Hang on one second. There he is.
Leah, thanks so much. That was really interesting. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Russ Agdern. Many of us have heard him. He's from HIAS. He's the grassroots campaign manager at HIAS. Thanks so much, Russ, for giving us your time.
Oh, what a pleasure. It's so great to be on. Thank you so much. And Yasher Koach, Kol HaKavod, thank you for all your incredible work, Leah. It's nice to see you. We're somewhat we live not too far from each other in Brooklyn. We got to come to a meeting in Westchester via Zoom to catch up. So always a machaye, always it gives me life, as the saying says. So apologies for if any of you were able to join our training for Advocacy Week this afternoon. I'm going to do kind of a condensed version, being very mindful and appreciative of Marty keeping us all on task and on time. I'm going to share my screen just a little bit because I want to talk to you about our August Advocacy Week. Every year HIAS does a period of advocacy with grassroots leaders like you all over the country. And this year is no different. This year we are doing our advocacy in August during recess. And we're doing it this way for a couple of reasons. The first one is, you know, as you heard the previous speakers mention, and you yourselves know quite well, we've all been a little busy this year. It's been pretty insane in terms of just like there's so much happening, and so much, you know, people working so hard and working together to try to help a lot of folks out. But for folks who were tuned in, we had an Afghan Adjustment Act call-in day scheduled for February 28th that we had to cancel because Putin had invaded, and we were scrambling to try to figure out, everybody was all hands on deck trying to figure out, you know, what is the highest response going. So for folks who don't know, HIAS is one of the 9 resettlement agencies here in the United States. As you can see behind me, we are also active in a whole bunch of other countries, including Ukraine, working with longtime former HIAS Ukraine, now their own organization that we work extremely close with. We're working with communities in Europe to set up welcome circles, not all that different from the welcome circles that are happening here in the United States. My bailiwick is predominantly organizing and advocacy, and especially the advocacy these days. So HIAS is undertaking its advocacy this year in August. I would say that the biggest reason we're doing it in August, in addition to the fact that there's been so much going on, is this is actually a really critical moment for the 3 pieces of legislation that you could see on the screen there, the 3 issues that you see on the screen there. Right now, there have been multiple efforts, bipartisan efforts, I'm sorry to say, to extend Title 42, which is a piece of health code that's been used to keep asylum seekers from being able to apply for asylum within the United States. And with the Biden administration attempting to sunset Title 42, we have a massive effort to try to undermine it and basically end the right to asylum at our southern border as we know it. The vast majority of the Afghans evacuated here are coming up on 1 year of being within the United States, which means that the year that they have to apply for asylum is running out. So if there's no Afghan Adjustment Act, then the avenue for the Afghans that so many people across the country have worked hard to help find home, right? To help get settled here in this country and make it their home. That work is I don't want to say at risk because that feels like alarmist, but it's going to get a lot more complicated for the Afghans to be able to find a pathway to citizenship unless some sort of Afghan Adjustment Act gets done. And finally, the refugee admission goal is a fiscal year number. The fiscal year starts October 1st. And around now, we're going to be doing Congress is going to be doing the consultations with the administration to push for that number to start the new fiscal year. And this was deviling me before. There we go. So we have three issues we're talking about. We need Congress to protect the right to asylum at our southern border by not allowing any legislative attempts to keep Title 42 in place. There are 2 poison pills that passed through appropriations that we're working to get removed, but it's critical that we let as many members of Congress know that we can, that we want to see them stand up for the right to asylum. Title 42 doesn't keep anybody safe from COVID. Applications for asylum can be administered safely at the border. This is they're all using Title 42 as a scare tactic to try to shut down asylum. And so we need to stand up for the folks that need to apply for asylum. I'm going a little quick because I want to be mindful of my time. All right. Afghan Adjustment Act. Right now, the Afghans that are here, the vast majority of them are here under a provision known as humanitarian parole. Humanitarian parole does not have a direct pathway to residency and citizenship. So we need an Afghan Adjustment Act, which was modeled on the Cuban Adjustment Act that happened when Cubans came to this country, that makes a pathway in our very confusing and difficult and needing a lot of work immigration system. We need to create some kind of an actual pathway that simplifies it to make it so the Afghans that our military heroically evacuated here actually can stay and have this matter settled, that they can have residency. And this is something that is supported. It does have bipartisan support in Congress, but Congress is in a place that everybody, even our allies, need to be nudged to work to make this a priority. And the ask around the refugee admissions is, we want to have an admissions goal of 200,000 for this year. Previous year, this current year, the goal was set at 125,000, which sounds like a lot, right? But actually, we've only been able to, through the U.S. Refugee Assistance Program, the State Department program, to this point, through 3/4 of the year, we've only resettled 15,100 refugees. Now, we know that the U.S. government has undertaken a lot to work to resettle, to bring Afghans out of harm's way and to allow Ukrainians to come here as well. And we appreciate that. But we also know that there are people that have been languishing in the State Department refugee program pipeline for a long time, thanks to no small part to the previous administration. And that actually leads to the second part of this ask, which is, we want to, people here are familiar with this phrase, I imagine, no bread, no Torah. Does that ring a bell to anybody? Any synagogue presidents or administrators on here? I know that was something that my dad occasionally said to me when he was president of Temple Beth Abraham in Tarrytown back in the day. That refugee admissions goal could be 500,000, could be 1 million. Wouldn't matter if the State Department doesn't have enough money and resources and staff to actually do the work. So the second piece of this ask is to ask the administration and Congress to make sure that the Refugee Assistance Program has the resources that it needs to achieve this goal. So I'm gonna stop sharing for just a moment. I know that I'm just about to time.
I was just about to say that, Russ. You've got a couple of minutes left, and then we've got to move on. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. So just a quick pitch. I know that last year, WJCI did meetings with all three members of the Westchester congressional delegation, and I believe plans are in the works to work to get to that too. So the biggest thing that I could ask you is, those meetings are happening. The week of action is August 15th through the 19th. And the biggest thing I could ask of you is to connect with the WJCI leadership, let them know which district you're in, and let them know that you want to be a part of these conversations with your members of Congress. If I have a minute, could I open it up to questions, or would that be all right?
We'll do questions at the end,
Great.
Russ. There'll be some time left at the end.
Great.
That's what we're trying to preserve for questions later.
Perfect. So we are providing talking points, a basic map on how the meetings go. Well, obviously, you've got an incredible team that knows 2, 3, 4, 5 things about all these issues there. And I'm excited to work hand in glove with you, as I have for the time that I've been at HIAS. And I'm excited to see, and one last thing. I spoke with Sandy Chayton from B'nai Jeshurun on SCRIC about the possibility of doing some joint SCRIC WJCI meetings with the senators. So that's something that's a little bigger, a little different from last year. We want to make sure. All right. Thank you all for all you do. It's great to be on here. It's great to see members of the governor's team on here taking the work seriously, and to see all of you. Thank you so much for letting me.
Thank you so much, Russ.
Thanks, Russ. It's really important for us to know what the critical issues are. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Elizabeth Dembrowskey. She is from Good Counsel. And she's co-founded it in 2016 to provide affordable legal advice to nonprofit organizations.
Thanks, Ruth. And thanks everyone for being here. Whenever I'm entering spaces where we're coming together to talk about the work that we do, I am really inspired by your presence. I know people's schedules are very busy, and to take time in the evening to be here together to talk and to learn about the work that's being done is really uplifting for me, and I'm really honored to be a part of it. It's nice to see you, Russ. I was happy to hear about all the goings on with HIAS and to hear from the other speakers about the amazing work that's being done in different sectors. I did want to start by just making a comment on something the rabbi had said at the start, talking about women and their background and their lack of rights to have property. And I think with the overturning of Roe versus Wade, it made me as an attorney think a lot, as a mother by choice, about the idea that if there is an inalienable right, if there is, it is the right to control one's own body. And I think about my work in immigration, and I'm glad I have a few moments to share some of the work that Good Counsel is doing in immigration. A lot of the work we do is to help people that don't have a voice, that they can share with the world, that they are persecuted for a variety of different reasons. We do a fair amount of asylum work. And more recently, we've been doing a lot of work helping people from Afghanistan. And it was actually the story of one particular client's daughter that motivated me and ultimately our team to take part in the work that we're doing around humanitarian parole and actions related to that, holding this administration responsible, holding the Agency of United States Citizen Immigration Services responsible, and ensuring that we stay and stay focused on those that we start with. And the client's daughter, the client had come to the United States on a special immigration visa, as someone who had served our government, the US government, during the United States presence in Afghanistan. And he had served our government and its agenda very well. And he was rewarded with being given for himself, his wife, and his children that were younger, the opportunity to come and build a life that they're living in the United States. He's a very honest man. And although he knew of people that put different birth dates on forms, it's nothing he would have considered. That's not who he was. That's not how he went about his life. And I think sometimes he probably wonders if maybe he had made the wrong decision for his daughter by being honest on her birth date. Because he was honest with her birth date, she wasn't eligible to come when the rest of the family came. She stayed in Afghanistan, and she received and studied for a degree in economics. And I know when I read about the US withdrawal and the role the Taliban is and was and looks to continue to be playing in Afghanistan, that there were women that were burning their degrees. As an attorney who's really proud of her admittance, as I am, in New York, New Jersey, California, Florida, Massachusetts, think of these women and I'm terrified for them, and terrified for the world that we're allowing to exist, that we have seemed to, in many cases, forgotten about them and moved on to different cycles. And I don't mean any disrespect to anyone dealing with things around the world. It's complicated. There are all kinds of issues that are coming up. I feel a special connection to people who have been left behind in Afghanistan, who are family members of those that had served our government. I feel that we have an ongoing commitment to them, and it's not one that I am willing to ignore. And I wanted to come here tonight to not just pontificate about it, but to ask for your help. What we're doing right now is we are working on creating country condition report updates for the close to 30 clients of individual petitions that we filed. And what that would involve is having people that aren't necessarily lawyers, but are readers and writers and can help synthesize information to look at some of the press reports that have been going on in the past weeks and months about Afghanistan, connect that to the individual cases that we have, and help tell a more full story to our government about why these individuals need and deserve humanitarian parole. In addition to that, our office is considering a lawsuit against United States Citizen Immigration Services for failure to act for the very many members of our client base that haven't been processed for humanitarian parole. In addition to the litigation that we're considering, we're also doing a number of asylum cases for both what's considered affirmative, which is an initial interview for someone, as well as defensive cases. Defensive cases, after someone has been interviewed and they were not granted asylum, they're given what I consider a second bite at the apple, and they appear before an immigration judge, and there's a Department of Homeland Security attorney whose responsibility is essentially to object to their being admitted for asylum. And those cases that we handle at Good Counsel are not limited to people from Afghanistan. In fact, right now, most of the cases that we're handling are from people from Pakistan that were victims of violent Islamic fundamentalists that had targeted the clients and their families, as well as people from Nepal who had been the victims of Maoists and have been ongoing threatened for their participation in being activists both for women and as well as members of the Dalit community, which if you had studied about the history of Nepal and caste systems, they were commonly referred to in years past, decades past, as what was called untouchable. Because of the level of discrimination they were facing. Many of these men and women, who some of whom are now my clients, have undergone horrible discrimination and persecution in Nepal, not only in the larger environment, but also because they were fighting for human rights and for democracy in Nepal. And for those cases, what we're looking for is for people to help us with practice in interviewing. I know my clients very well. They become almost members of my family. In fact, when my son was born, the whole family came over from New Jersey. One of my clients' families, all 7 members came to the hospital. It was really cute. They couldn't get in. It was COVID, and the security. My son unfortunately had to go into the ICU at Mount Sinai in Manhattan, but they were there and they came, and they came with the gift card, which was really sweet and appreciated. And they really become members of my family, which in a way makes it harder for me to represent them when I'm practicing playing the role of a judge or an officer or a government attorney. And so we are always looking for people with different experiences that don't know the case as well as I do, to practice with them. And so I wanted to come here tonight, not only to see and be inspired by you all, which I have been, thank you, I appreciate that, and all of you, but also to ask for people who are willing to help us with some of the things that we're working on. And just to iterate it again, what we're looking for with our work on humanitarian parole is country condition updates for the applications that we've already filed. We've made an internal decision not to put in more applications for humanitarian parole. We don't want to give clients a form of false hope unless we know this is going to be a pathway that could be successful for them. But what we are doing is taking seriously the commitment we've made to our current clients and ensuring that our government know about the individual cases and what their situations look like. And then we're also looking for help with the asylees, both the affirmative and defensive, practicing for their interviews, and also helping get together some of the research on country condition reports for them as well. I'm happy to answer questions for people, and I'm really glad to be here and didn't want to speak too long. I can tend to talk for
You were
hours.
perfect, Elizabeth. You're right on the dot.
Good. See,
Thank
there we
you.
go. I'm really
Thank
proud of
you.
myself.
And we've
And my
put your
coughing
contact
fit didn't take over. I'm sorry that I was off camera for a lot, but I have a
It's fine.
cold, and my coughing can be quite distracting.
Oh,
So
appreciate that. Your contact information is in the chat, so people have
It is.
questions or want to volunteer, they can be in touch with you. Thank you so
Thanks.
much.
Thank you, Marty.
Okay, my turn. Where did I go? I've lost me. Okay, so I'm going to begin the conclusion of tonight by talking a little bit about all that has happened since our last quarterly meeting, not the least of which, of course, has been the rapid unfolding of the situation in Ukraine, for which we have just received a grant. We have been given a grant through what has been coined the Ukrainian Resettlement Grant Initiative to do work, and the money has come from UJA and the Shapiro Foundation. We're working closely with HIAS and other partners to bring Ukrainians to safety. So far, and we've just started, we have helped to welcome 5 families to Westchester County, and that includes with the help of a number of synagogues. We're so happy and awed as always to see so much support from our community. If you want to find out about forming welcome circles, that's what they are called as serving Ukrainians coming to the U.S. now to bring families to safety and get your community involved in this historic moment, please contact WJCI, info@wjci.org will work just fine, and we'll be back in touch with you. We've also started to have monthly gatherings for newly arrived Ukrainians. Our next one is set for Sunday, August 7th at St. Michael's Ukrainian Catholic Church in Yonkers. We are Zooming, and also we are Zooming a special concert for our new by our new partners, Concerts in Motion. That's on August 21st. Information about all of that can be found on our website, wjci.org. And now Holly Rosenfink, our president, will conclude.
Thank you so much, Marty. I just want to say, I heard it from Rabbi Shuck. Eva, you also expressed about about how we as Jews understand the plight of a refugee, and we're paving the way for displaced people to feel welcome here in our region. And as Marty just told all of you, we have started to roll out the carpet for Ukrainians. I want to pause and just say thank you. There was a man on this call, I think he left, named Joe Beckman. He's sponsoring a college student from Ukraine who got a full ride at Columbia, but she couldn't get here. She needed money for her apartment. She needed money for something else, and he's sponsoring her. Not in the traditional way of filling out the application, but helping her with money. Two other members of our group, Bruce Fryer and Herb Leventer, as soon as I asked them to help buy hearing aids for a 91-year-old woman from Ukraine, they stepped up immediately, and she's getting hearing aids. We've had dental and orthodontist services offered for free. We've had temporary housing out the door. That's helping groups, giving them time to find homes for these families. It's giving the families a safe place to be, and it's the mothers without their husbands warm food on the table and a warm bed and not having to worry at night. And we've had free camp tuition. I wanted to mention that, and believe it or not, that's just the cusp. We've seen such generosity from so many of you on this call, and we're so grateful. I just want to end our call by telling all of you that while you can see that we are working largely for Ukraine right now, because we do step in when there is a crisis, as Russ said, we are supporting all of the efforts that he described. We're advocating for every single one. We advocate for all immigrants, and we just want to reiterate that again and again. The core of our work does remain mobilizing support for resettlement, and again, it's all immigrants. On that note, you heard a lot about Afghan women tonight, or women in general, but Afghan women, we are creating a program to empower them that launches this fall. It's a 5-session course that will be going into the rights, their basic rights, the right to their bodies, the right to education, the right to career. And that will be taking place at JCC Mid-Westchester. They're also planning a webinar around mental health with, I believe, my colleague here, Michael Goldman from WJCS, and others who are working hard on that. And a support group for women from Ukraine at WJCS, who has become one of our core partners. The last thing, you can get all of this on our website, like Marty said, but we also have a solidarity program being led by Howard Horowitz, who's also on this call, on September 21st with a keynote by Ruth Messenger. Russ, you have 2 birthdays that night, you can't come, but you are gonna send somebody. But we're really excited about that. And we also want you all to participate in the Advocacy Week that Russ talked about. On that note, 9:01, not bad, Marty, right?
No, excellent.
We want to thank all of our speakers tonight. Eva, Russ, Elizabeth, Leah, you all were terrific. Jenny, we're so glad you popped in. I just want to give a quick shout out to a lot of key WJC people on this call. Alan, Howard, Judy, thank you so much for coming. Rachel Klein from Hillel's of Westchester, it's an honor to have you. All of you, I could go into, each one of you are very special in so many ways. Thank you for coming. If anyone has any remaining comments, we're going to give you just a minute to ask questions, or you can stay if you want. But thank you so much for being on our team and helping so many people, and for your compassion and kindness. Thank you. Over and out.
Okay.
Unless you want to stay. Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.
All right, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Russ, as always.
Good night.
Thank you. Bye.
A pleasure. Thanks for giving me the chance to check in with everybody.
Such a pleasure, Russ. I'm going to email you tonight about this
Sounds-
the Advocacy Week. Okay.
Sounds perfect. Looking forward to it.
Perfect. Thank you. Jenny, so glad you came. That was serendipitous that we met last week.
Thank you for the invitation. It was great
You
to
are,
hear about all the
welcome,
great work
and
that's happening in Westchester.
thank you so much, Jenny. And I feel like this is the beginning for us. We're glad we met. Alan, so good to see you.
Thank you. Great to be here. Good job.
Thank you so much.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Elizabeth, feel better. She's gone.
Thank
No, she's
you.
not gone. Feel better.
Howard, are you still there? Elizabeth, thank you so much. Brian? Oh.